I ran into a drag queen in Times Square once. And she said, "Isn't it about time you hung up your balls?"
Were you ever motivated by money?
It was funny. I was pretty much accepted whatever the rate was. I remember being on a talk show, the old Tomorrow Show with Tom Snyder on whatever, 70s something. I remember saying to him, I couldn't believe I was getting good money to fuck this girl. And he said, "Oh, good money? What do you mean by good money?" And I said, "Well, I think I have $30. And it was like his jaw dropped and he stared at me, like I was crazy. But to me, like, that was still when I was driving a cab, and it was any money was good money to fuck a beautiful girl. I mean, it was crazy that I was getting paid for it. He couldn't absorb that. I mean, I needed the money and wanted to, to be able to live, but it wasn't ever, I guess, about the money. And I always said to people, well, like they say, well, how do you feel about being exploited? I said, well, big fuck it, I'm having a good time. And I said, if I want to exploit people, then I'll exploit people someday down the road if I feel like doing that. Everybody has their business. Later on, as the film was in the California scene, then it got a little higher. But in the New York beginnings, that was about it. Yeah, those one-day wonders. I think I was happy to make $100 or something like that. I remember approaching a prostitute in Times Square in the neighborhood one day, and I said, how much, And I didn't really go out with prostitutes much, but I was sort of thinking about this one. I said, well, how much, get? And she said, $100. And I thought to myself, $100? I said, that's what I make. Who do you think you are? $100. Like, you're not a porn star. You're just a trash on the street. God, $100. Forget it. But, it seemed okay. I don't know.
Let's talk a little about where you lived in this period, Times Square.
I loved Times Square in the 70s. To me, I wouldn't have wanted to live anywhere else. And even though in that same period, I traveled from my base in Times Square to, beautiful places in Europe or wherever, Times Square seemed like the focal point of the universe. It was like where everything was really plugged in. There was a tremendous vital energy. It was the theater district, so you did get tourists, and the Broadway energy is show business energy, the actors and so on. But then you also had everything else going on. There was a lot of prostitution. I remember a girlfriend at the time was going away, and she said, well, here's some money for prostitute. I don't want you to see anybody, but here's some money for prostitute. To me, that sort of shows the mood of the era, okay, here's prostitute. And it was just great, free. And all I had to do was go outside and pick up a girl. And I had one in mind, actually. I saw gun deals, drug deals outside my window. Picked up prostitutes right from my window. I looked down at the street and said, hey, come on up.
Do you think that the way you view the old adult films has changed over the years?
Funny, because I remember in those days, I couldn't imagine. You'd see, you go to the theaters, and there'd be a lot of guys, older guys, and they'd just be sitting there watching, like they're remembering something. And I couldn't imagine how they did. To me, it was like, don't you have to jerk off? I mean, it's the sign stuff, you have to jerk off. So it's interesting. Now that I'm older, I can sort of understand the pleasure of just watching, thinking about it.
In these early years, how did you spend your time between the films?
Wallowing in time. It's like my life is largely been about that. Appreciating time, appreciating life, or just enjoying the time, having a sense of the moment, wallowing in time. Not being particularly ambitious for anything or needing anything, just catching the moment. It's almost like a ride, just being, that's the most important thing to me, is being. Being. That's all there is, really. I mean, the rest is just nonsense running around. Being is really what it's about, just being. It's sort of related to the Milton line, they also serve who only stand and wait. Do you know this poem? I think that's the last line of the poem. I'm not sure. They also serve who only stand and wait. I mean, there's nothing, the idea is that nothing is required of us. God doesn't ask anything special of us. It just is what it is, So, and that's why I guess in some sense I've been a failure, because I never needed to attain anything. I never needed to reach for anything. It all seemed to, whatever was given me seemed fine. I was always okay. And I remember the first time I went to overseas, I was 18 or something, I had no money. I had a one-way ticket and no money when I got there, basically. But I saw this book. It was a religious thing. I'm not religious, but it was a religious thing. It was like this Buddhist monk talking, and he said that as long as you have a back, you'll have clothes, and as long as you have a mouth, you'll have something to eat. And it was with that kind of spirit I went off. That made sense to me. And it did work out fine. You know, I was landed with nothing, and there was always something came up. And it's all interesting. Whatever comes up. Whatever comes up.